Hello, friends, and welcome back to Igniting Imagination. I'm your host, Lisa Greenwood. In this season, we're exploring the theme of sanctifying friendship, what it is, why it matters, and how we can cultivate it in our lives and in the life of the church. Today's guests are all in with the church. They are two of my dear friends who also happen to be bishops in the United Methodist Church, Bishop Laura Merrill and Bishop Janice Huie. I'm joining with them in the conversation today as the three of us explore what has been meaningful about our friendship with each other and how our friendship impacts our leadership for the better, and why focusing on friendship is key for the church's thriving now and into the future. Their bios and all the information about this season, guests, and more are on our website, ignitingimagination.org. Finally, here's a poem by Morgan Harper Nichols that pulls on themes you'll hear in our conversation today with Bishop Merrill and Bishop Huie. To a woman telling a story to her friend on a morning walk. You may not remember everything about this day, but in the days after this one, you may see this as a blessed reminder of having this space to walk it out, talk it through, side by side and not alone. Because not long ago you felt unseen, the world was big, you were small, and billowing wind, you were lost in it all. But now you are here, and you know at least one who on one day found one moment to walk and listen in candid conversations, in faithful morning light. A blessed reminder of having this space, because sometimes you just need to walk it out, talk it through, side by side, and not alone. Thanks for joining us today. Here's my conversation with Bishops Merrill and Huie. Enjoy. It is so fun today to have two of my very dear friends joining me on the podcast, and they both happen to be bishops in the United Methodist Church. But let me invite each of them to say hi. Bishop Huie, welcome. So glad you're here.
Oh, it is great to be here, and thanks for providing a conversation with two of my favorite people, both you and Laura.
Awesome. Bishop Merrill, what a gift to get to be with you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm so grateful for this invitation, and I'll just echo this chance to be with the two of you is a delight this afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah.
A great way to spend a Friday afternoon.
It is. Right. So quick note for our listeners that this is going to be a little different. Usually I'm kind of the interviewer and the guide for a conversation with, in this series, it's been two friends. But this time I invited two of my good friends to be in the conversation. So I get to be part of the conversation as well. So Laura and Janice, I'm just delighted that we get to spend time together. And I wish we had a cup of tea and we were all sitting in the same room and we were talking about what's on our minds and what's hurting our hearts and what's keeping us up at night. And so let's do a little glimpse of that with our virtual cup of tea as we spend some time together. But let's back up a little bit. And I would love to hear from you two how you met, and then we'll kind of share a little bit about how I met you and those sorts of things. And so Janice and Laura, how did you two meet?
Mm-hmm. You go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So
Janice.
I guess I'll start in here, and I'll say that part of what you've done, Lisa, is pick up generations here. Because when I met Laura Merrill for the first time, she was 11 years old, and Bob and I had just been appointed to St. Mark United Methodist Church, which was pastored by Laura's dad. Chuck. And and we were there for 6 years. So there was a long period of time in which we were a part of Laura's growing up. And quite frankly, with the congregation's help, we grew up too. I mean, that was my third year in ministry, and we are all kind of learning our way through that. And it was an amazing time in the church, and in the world, and in our lives. I mean, so both of our children were born there, and no one in the I mean so Laura, you get to make the newspaper where you are these days. I made the newspaper because then, now we're back in the 70s, because I was a pregnant clergy woman and I had a baby. That
Wow. Yeah.
think how
Yeah, that's
different
right.
think how different we are now. But it was quite the day. I could say more, but you go in.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, that this interesting, the way that our relationship started when I was a kid, and you were my pastor, and honestly, my parents, the reason you followed my dad is because my parents were divorced in 72, 73, remarried, and so then my dad moved on to another appointment, and you and Bob followed, and so it was a difficult time for me as a kid. I was, moving into a time of a lot of emotional strain as a kid, the eldest of these divorced parents, and the pain of that separation and all of that. And what did that mean? And I think different siblings in my family dealt with the church in different ways, certainly as they got older. But for me, the church was this place of refuge and acceptance and affirmation. And y'all were such an amazing big part of that. Um, and so I remember the square playpens that would kind of fold up like an accordion kind of. And so you had one of those in the church office. And I tell people now, I'm like, I don't know how many little girls across the United States saw a United Methodist woman clergy person with a playpen in the church office in 1976 or whatever year that was. But I did. I thought that was a thing that I could do. I never knew I couldn't do it. And so I saw those things. I heard people saying the word bishop in conjunction with your name in the 70s. That church was saying that then. Okay, I remember hearing it. And then Bob, right, exactly. It did. It did. And I forget that it was your third year in ministry. But then the other thing is just Bob was such a pastor to me, and he kind of ran the youth stuff, especially once I got into youth age, and just such a dear pastoral presence for me. And the two of you were just, golly, what a dynamic duo. Taught me confirmation, taught me all kinds of things. And so, yeah, but then the point of that is for that to be the initial part of this way this relationship started. And then to have, as I've gotten older and become a clergy person, and now to have that develop into friendship is just this remarkable blessing. Such a joy, such a joy. So grateful. Yeah.
And one of the great, wonderful things about our friendship, especially as the years have gone by, is that it has lots of depth and breadth to it. And what I mean by that is my ordination certificate, the calligraphy that is written on there, is from the person who did that is Laura's grandfather, and who's a Methodist pastor in the conference, and who did these for every single person. I always knew that was special. I always had it hanging in my office, and I always knew that Bruno did this calligraphy. And as the years went by, and he's part of the saints in heaven, there's a layer that's there that never goes away.
No question.
and in a a strange, and so our younger son died in an accident when he was 13, and if you're the pastor, I mean, where you turn? And I was the district superintendent at the time. And of course, we turned to Laura's dad, Chuck Merrill. And that's who we both called as we were dealing. And that's, I mean, these are bonds that just kept drawing all of us closer and closer.
Absolutely.
And later on,
Wow.
and absolutely.
Well, and you're, my grandfather, that's on my mother's side. And then you also served my grandmother's family's church, so that whole line of this long German heritage up there in the hill country of Texas, and Janice and Bob were the pastors to those people. I mean, it's just, you cannot make this stuff up. The layers of connectedness that generationally do. Yeah, it's just a lot. It's a lot. Yeah,
it is. And we've been, the two of us, I mean, there have been others who've been blessed by this, especially Bob, because he's been a part of every bit of it. But for Laura and me, this has been such a gift to be with one another, and for me to, let me tell one more quick story about Laura that is just one of my favorite. So she graduates from college, and of course she's smart and does all these good things. But then it was like, what next? And she's the only person I've seen do this or heard doing this. So when she was trying to think about how God was calling her, what was the next step, she sent out a letter to, I don't know how many of her friends, but I know that Bob and Janice got one, and inviting us to dream dreams with her. Where would she go? What would the next be? Where would it be? And Bob Huie, oh yeah, I remember it. And Bob Huie writes back this beautiful letter in which he said, "You ought to be a missionary, Laura." And there was some kind of arrangement already kind of percolating along with the general board, what was then the General Board of Global Ministries. And how many years did you spend?
Yeah, so I mean, it ended up being 5 years total as a missionary in Latin America, and then on the border in Tucson, in Arizona. Yeah. Okay, I'm forgetting that discernment letter piece. I mean, I took the foreign service exam. I got accepted to Berkeley Law School. I did all, and then didn't do any of that, But yeah, that's really interesting. I'd forgotten the letter piece of that.
Bob and I hadn't forgotten. We hadn't forgotten. We both talked about it yesterday.
I love
you
that.
Can claim credit for that. Man.
This friendship that is so deep and rich has all these roots, all these, as you've said, Janice, these layers of history and connectedness, and I, that often happens in the church, but how beautiful to see this unfold, and to know that, since then you've many times called on each other, or, shared a meal, or, cried on each other, or, all the things that happen in the midst of ministry. And, Laura, you and I met actually through a TMF thing. Right? We were both invited to this overnight kind of stewardship thing.
Stewardship.
Yes. Really in the way early days of leadership ministry. And you've heard me say this, but for a long time, I've called you my camp friend, right? Because what happens at camp, like you tell like these deep, intimate secrets and struggles and whatever, because you're not going to see them again, or maybe you're going to see them again next summer, but
go deep quick.
Right. You go deep quick. And we did. But what that did for us was, I think what has happened is every time we're together, we go deep quick. And so it's not that we talk every week, and it's not, but there might be a text or a call or, you're coming through Dallas and you spend the night, or we even vacationed together in a little pod during the pandemic. And,
Yes.
But it
Yes,
has
we did.
always felt like our friendship skipped way over the dating period straight to the real intimacy of depth. And that's been such a gift to me as we've gone through things personally, but also professionally. It's been such a
Absolutely. And I think there was, in part, it really didn't have anything to do with the event itself, although the event was, great and all that, but
Right.
it was really kind of in some ways this, or at least from my perspective, and I think this is what resonated, at least from where I sat, was both coming from a place of need in some common ways.
Yeah.
And living some similar experiences that you wouldn't have necessarily been able to perceive from the surface.
Right.
My hair was very short growing back in from cancer treatment. And, you had, of course, a dear friend who was in the midst of that. And so that connected. There were, questions about home things and personal lives. And it was just this kind of resonance that happened very quickly. And I think allowed us, and, going deep means in part going vulnerable. And it was about not just, sharing the mysteries of the universe, but it was like talking about our own stuff that was remarkable, really, how that worked. Yeah.
And it's one of those friendships that I've always felt like the Spirit brought us together and has been very present in the midst. There's never been a time that I have been with you that I didn't feel like there was absolute Holy Spirit presence. It feels like that kind of friendship to me. And
well, I feel that way too. I've not thought of those words, but thank you for articulating that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And Janice, we've had this amazing opportunity to work together at TMF. So TMF again is part of that. But I go way back to, not unlike Laura, where we begin to see ourselves in someone who is a leader and a model. And I remember right when you were either about to be elected or just elected, and we had a jurisdictional gathering. And you've heard me say this, Janice, but you said, I don't remember that, but I remember it. You were giving sort of wisdom and encouragement to a room full of clergy women and saying, one, wear bright. The guys are going to be dressed in dark, wear bright. and I've always remembered that. And two, you said, find a way to say yes. And those words have resonated with me always. I feel like they have been a part of how I understand what it is to be a leader in the church, is to have a yes spirit. And so that has been this amazing gift. And then to get to work together and to find that we're, again, breaking bread or sharing a glass of wine or worshiping together or planning out and dreaming for the sake of clergy in the church. And it has been like just such a great gift in my life to be able to be on this path and journey of imagination and discovery for the sake of the church. And to get to do that with you is amazing. Such a gift. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. But let me just say, what that means to me to see the two of you and others move, following the Spirit's call into ministry. That's like the greatest gift of all. And it makes the hard times kind of recede into the corners, which that's where they belong. And the grace of God and the beauty and the love and the kindness and the grace, it all just gets expanded by the grace of God. So anyway, a blessing that's friendships make things grow. So here we are.
Yeah. So I'd love for us to spend a little bit of time in this notion of holy friendship and Most of our listeners are clergy, lay leaders in the church. They're pouring out for the church all the time, and we've experienced how amazing and really beneficial it is for us to have these holy, truly holy friendships. So, what would you say to others about how to cultivate these holy friendships?
Mm-hmm.
And let me say,
You
in their own
yeah, go
lives,
ahead.
but also even in their congregations. Like, I mean, we can kind of go at it from both places. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an extrovert by nature, and now that takes on a different different flavor in the church, I think. And sometimes church is not always that same kind of cycle of energy that feeds. Sometimes it can really, tire people out. But for me, um, it feels to me like friendships wherever they are, both within my work and within the context even of the pastoral relationship, where there is a power relationship that we have to be aware of. That even so, I think one hallmark is my need for joy, and just this need to be where the party's going to be, and the party always involves other people, and those folk who are confident in themselves and that they're sharing the joy, like that. Just I wouldn't still be here if it weren't for those people, and so I'm just going to try to go where the party is, or bring the party to me. That's one thing, and the other is this theme of vulnerability. I mean, there's certain vulnerability you can do in the church setting with your people, and there's certain that probably doesn't belong there. And so I think it's Matt Bloom and some others, some of TMF's work have just talked about, boy, it is toxic to not be able to tell the truth. If you don't have somebody to tell the truth with about yourself, it is going to be a hard road, and you could end up hurting somebody else, actually. And so that gift, as painful as it can be, it just keeps me alive.
Yeah.
It keeps me alive. And so some of my friends probably are like, yeah, I'm about done with you calling me with all your whatever,
No
but
way.
I mean, but that's what I mean. That somebody who has seen you and is able to normalize, or able to give you a different way to look at it, or whatever it is, right? Or just bless you in the middle of it. Like, that's just life-saving for me. And so I don't know, cultivate. I just do it because I have to have it. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, many of the things that Laura's saying are true for me, except she's the extrovert and I'm the introvert in this friendship, and it's been that way for a long time. So I would talk about some of those things using the language of trust. That friendship at its deepest level, where that that I am both fed and can feed, has to do with the quality of trust between two people or three people or five people or whatever. It's never a big group. I mean, my most intimate things are going to be shared with 3, 4, but not not with huge crowds. But how someone that I can trust to tell me the truth about myself, to be real clear with me, someone that can hold me up if I'm crashing, somebody that'll talk to me before I step on an edge, and by the same token that I'm willing to be in a relationship with them, that the trust is so deep whether it's a short time or a long time, that that I can say to them, just as they could say to me, look, let's just tell the truth about what's going on here. And that gives the energy, the vitality, and a sense of, I think, for me, it's being held. It's I remember after David's death, I took a couple of my clergy women friends and we talked about it. And I said, I don't think I'm going to make it here. So I need you to tell me when, I mean, I'm the district superintendent in this district. I got a lot of people counting on me. I don't think I can do this, but I want you to tell me if I start falling off an edge and screwing up with these people that I'm responsible for, you've got to tell me and promise me those are kinds of things. They don't go away after that's over. Those are relationships that are going to be a part of your life from this time forward, and you hope for theirs too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think, I mean, we can trace these threads, this moment that you gave Janice about, this deep loss in your life and these friends who held you and, this notion of trust and vulnerability and such. These are, it feels in those moments like there's more happening there than what we brought to the table, right? That there's something happening between us that is very kind of Holy Spirit. God is in the midst of this. It is beyond what I can muster. There's something that is weaving us together and holding us together, which is why I feel so like the church has such an important role to play in friendships, that this is not something that's relegated to the schoolyard or the kitchen table. It actually happens in all those places, but the church actually has a role. And so I want to invite us into this conversation, we who are leaders in the midst of the church, right? To thinking about the role that the church plays in creating space for holy friendship. And this is the way I want to do this. In our conversation with Victoria White, who wrote this book on holy friendships, she talks about how society has actually kind of commodified friendships. Think about likes and all of this, right? Kind of, anyway, you get the idea here. So that if you take that as one end of the spectrum, and the other end of the spectrum is Jesus, who, chose to befriend this ragtag group of people that were his holy, intimate companions along the journey, right? So if we take that as the spectrum, I guess I want to say, where would you say the church is from kind of commodifying friendship to these Jesus's model of sacred friendships? Where is the church in that? And then let's kind of peel that back and play with that a little bit. I'm inviting us to a little excavation and truth telling, because we deeply love the church. We are all in with the church, and we want to be honest about, where we are. Yeah.
I make my way to answers to this kind of thing by talking. So who knows where this will go. But I mean, the things that pop into my mind as you describe that are the ways in which so many people feel they can't bring their full selves to church. That, if they're lucky, the pastor says something in the pastoral prayer or in the sermon that speaks to their private secret that they can't tell, and that God forbid that they leave on the surface when they come to church. That's kind of one end of it. Another end, the other thing that came to my mind was the kind of more relaxed spaces where the Sunday school class is in the backyard, watching their kids play around as they barbecue, a more real relationship, or even the way the church is allowing now and creating new kinds of spaces, whether it's a pub theology or a place where people can gather and be real from the get-go, and have all of that sort of pretentious or that assumption that you have to be somebody other than you are, that you can bring it all and bring all the questions and all the doubts and push back and all those things. Those spaces I think are precious, and I think we're getting better at making those, at finding those and creating them. Those are just the first two things that come to mind.
No, and as I think about this too, I think we've not in where where we've come to um, the being together, friendships, forming friendships, they've been just a byproduct of the other things that have gone on in church. And
Right.
so it's the byproduct of Sunday school or, whatever. What we haven't and what we need to learn how to do much better um, in those friendships is, Matt Russell's talk about improbable friendships. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
so we all badly need how to create more spaces for improbable friendships, and then how to be open to those improbable friendships coming toward us. I mean, to me, that's it's got to be much more intentional than in the future than it has been in the past. And we are beginning to have some support from within the culture, which I think has not been there for a long time, in the
Right.
sense that this loneliness epidemic, which
Yes.
has got so many negative outcomes, that people, if there's a way for the bridge to get built, um, the church, with some intentional work on its part, um, can that some good and new things can happen. I think about, just this week, it's been so hot in Texas, and y'all are, we've been that way too. This county, which has only got about 25,000, well, in the town, it's got about 15,000. There were 2 deaths this week from the
Wow.
overheating. Um,
Wow.
and
Gosh.
these were older people, and so you say, I mean, we got a ton of churches in this town. And there's a whole bunch of denominations and every other thing, but somehow there wasn't a connection, enough human connection for them to feel like they could reach out and say, hey, we need a fan or an air conditioner or something, or for somebody in one of those churches to know this person, these two older people, well enough to know that they were likely to be in trouble, and somebody needed to check on them. So the opportunity for new forms of friendship, opportunities for friendship, I think are enormous and important, and life and death.
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that what the church is
It,
about?
it,
It's really beyond what happens in the building and on Sunday. It's really about how we're connected as human beings. And yeah, sorry, Laura, you were going to say something.
no. I was just going to kind of build on that. And the other, person whom I've met thanks to TMF is Diamond Hargis, and
Mhm.
his statement that, God intends, or I don't know that he says God intends it, but that his work is to bring people together for mutual delight. I mean, that social capital is the most valuable capital there is, and that people are just waiting to fall in love with each other.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah. Yes.
gosh.
I have chills
I
even as you
love
say
that
it.
so much. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I love that so much. And because it is how I feel.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, we're all different, but that stuff keeps me alive. It keeps me going, and finding those people. Um, and so, what does it mean to not just turn to the person who, I may be acquainted with, but who are the other folk, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way of looking beyond. And it's not just looking beyond in order to take a bag of food over there, but looking beyond in order to actually, you know, have a friendship that grants me something, and mutually so,
Yeah.
right? From both directions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This mutual peace is
it's
really
very hopeful.
important. And it is hopeful.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
So I know we could talk all day about the direction of the church and the hope for the church and the real the place of the church in this larger culture and the role we desire and hope and want to be a part of making happen. And but I'm going to shift us a little bit and just to say, okay, all three of us are in, yeah, let's just call them significant leadership roles, and I'm curious if there has been a shift, or if you've observed any shift in your friendships and maybe even then your own need for, or how that has changed, or I don't know. I don't want to be too directive about how this conversation is or goes, but curious about the leadership role you have been in, are in, and how friendship plays a part.
I'm gonna let Bishop Huie go first. I feel like I always answer first.
Well, it's just fine. Well, I'm speaking for myself. I felt like I needed friends more than ever in the role of episcopacy, and partly because my learning curve was straight up, and it stayed straight up until I retired. I mean, in that sense. I mean, but what I mean by that is that because the change that is happening in the culture and in the church is happening so fast, it was like, I'd get something learned, and then by golly, it'd be changed. And so people who loved me and were willing to, tell me the truth about what I was doing right and what was wrong, or what I should be thinking about and what I didn't, and people who prayed for me on a regular basis. Those I needed that more. I think, being a pastor at the point at which, or a district superintendent, that was more containable. So I didn't find myself fretting so much as I did later on as a bishop. And so, yes, I've friendships friendships helped me stay centered going through at the level of change that was happening all around me. So I'll just stop there for a while. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Especially that straight up learning curve. Yeah, I'm down. Yeah. I'm down with that. I think that, and I've heard bishops say this before, the experience of being an itinerant pastor is one where you're frequently pulling up your tent stakes and going someplace else and developing new relationships and a new pattern of life. And sometimes that really does take you away from friends you've met in the community or nearby or whatever. It is an entirely different thing to pull up stakes and move to a different state.
Right.
And that really is different, and is different for me in this career. And has been, obviously, there's grief to that. It was Bishop Huie who so gently and helpfully reminded me at one point. She said, if you're doing your job right, you're going to hit the pillow so hard every night you won't have time to have friends or something. I think she said something super pastoral like that, if I remember correctly. I was like, okay, that does not make me feel better. But actually, to some degree, there is this bigness of the task that fills a lot of space. And there are wonderful people in the work whom I encounter, whether regularly or just, sporadically. And there is a joy bucket that gets filled for me regularly, even by people who are not maybe ongoing friends. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, classify these people in that way. So that is one way that in this moment I do get fed, and my spirit is comforted, and And some of them are very glad to tell me what they believe is the truth about things. And so, whether I always resonate with all they say, so that's been interesting. At the same time, this is where the cultivation of the friendship, which used to be easier and used to be part of the pattern of my life. This is where cultivation comes in. I do have to be more intentional, and ask for what I need, and pick up the phone, and ask for the Zoom call or whatever. And so that I'm imagining that will morph over time. It'll change. I'm just now 6 months out from having, in fact, 2 days from now, it's 6 months since my truck unloaded, kind of thing. And so it's going to be a process and a developmental one, but I have had to be more intentional about people who know me outside this role, and being in connection with them, and at the same time taking joy from the places I can within the work. And then I'm also trusting that there will be friendships outside my work in this place. It just takes a lot longer to develop those. I don't have lots of hobby time, and so those will come. And I'm just trying to keep my eyes open, and my willingness open. But so far my social needs are mostly met.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about ways that we cultivate friendships and new friendships, especially at this stage in our lives, our respective lives, and what that looks like when you're super busy. And as you said, making time to pick up the phone or text those that know you outside of the role, and still call you Laura, and that kind of thing, right? And I've been, you all know, we've talked about it so much, but been a part of a covenant group for 25 years. And I know, Janice, you have too been part of a covenant group of clergy women for decades. And I feel like in every moment they're with me. I mean, that's the intensity of our sort of holy connection, is that whenever I'm, in a stressful moment, standing in front of a group of people, a board meeting, or speaking, or whatever it might be, I know I have this sense that I'm not alone. There's this embodied presence of the holy that's with me in these holy friendships, that it doesn't matter that they're not in the room or in the audience. Literally, they're sort of always with me. And there's something about these connections the three of us have, and other friendships too, that feel very present, that I think, for me at least, has been life-giving. They keep me honest, and but also bold, courageous. Like, I am more courageous because I have these friends and encouragers.
Yeah. I think, and I don't know why I don't have that kind of group, but I don't. Now I have friendships from different stages in my life, and there is a group of college friends that's particularly close, but whoever they are, I do have the sense that, especially when things are hard, that I can even see them sort of holding.
Yeah.
And you said that earlier, holding who I am. And there's that, whatever the window is with the four parts, and the part that and others don't see, and the part that others see that you don't see, and all of that. Like, they have a read on me that I don't even have. These people have known me so long that they know all the way around the block,
Right.
Oh, well, there she goes again. And so that is a great and precious gift in the world. And just to know that there are folk out there who know that, and hold that, and I hold it for them.
Yeah.
That is a precious, precious thing.
Yeah. And I stand a little taller because of it, and I'm, more brave in my leadership, and I think hold me accountable to being truer to myself too. That's So I know we could talk all afternoon and would love that, but I'm going to ask a final question. This is the question that we're asking all of our guests. And really, we've touched on this all throughout our conversation. So it's a bit of a softball. So complete the sentence. You know you're in a holy friendship when.
Well, I'll jump in here and say just the line that came to me quickly when I saw that question or sentence completion is Galatians 5. Thinking about it, it's a time and a space and a relationship in which love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, gentleness, all those are expanded and make us more whole. It's when when the fruit of the spirit is enlarged, then I think that we are there in terms of a sanctified friendship.
Mm. Well, that's a much more
I know. I wish
just
she'd
a
gone last. What do you think, Laura?
right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's a robust way
I love it. No,
in
it's
a
so
more
good.
complete, no, it's perfect.
It
It's
is.
perfect. Like more complete way of saying that and one of you said this earlier in this conversation. What comes to me is that I'm in a holy friendship when I have both the desire and the energy and the willingness to be better, to be my best, truest self.
Truest self.
That I want to, and I feel empowered to do so.
Yeah.
By that relationship. Yeah.
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 Beautiful. So I.
What about you, Lisa?
Right. Again, I wish I'd started and let y'all finish out, but I really do think about holy friendships are those that help me to be my best self, right? And I've said this earlier, but where I feel like there's something more at work than what I bring. There's something more at work, and I know that that's the holy, and I'm so grateful for it. I am grateful for each of you in my life.
And we love you.
We love you too.
Love you too.